Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Seems like more and more this is happening where people judge other people. Could be on social media, could be personal connections, could be relationships. Just everybody's judging each other. Why are we doing this? We're going to talk about that today and how to get around that from happening. And he is your success strategy coach. He's phenomenal. Tom Marino is back with us. Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good, Steve. How are you? It's been a quick week, my friend. Very quick week.
Yeah. And it's great to have you back. I like your shirt. I'm not judging you. I mean,
you're right. We're surrounded by judgment.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't we define judgment? We all, might have an idea of what it might be, but how would we define it?
Judgment to me is this statement of opinion that turns into a realization or feeling of fact in our lives. And I think that sometimes when we get judgmental about ourselves, we immediately go to this negative world where if you had just done that better, if you had just done it in a better way, or if you had just read that extra book, you would be able to speak about this. Or if you had just done something differently, like shame on you for not doing that, right? But we never look at judgment in a positive way, right? Like, oh, I did a good job here. Like I judged the situation. We tend to look at the situation or ourselves as always lacking, right? If you come from a very judgmental mindset, it's usually a negative mindset. It's usually one that's about lack and not abundance. And when we judge other people, we are often judging the things in ourselves that we don't want to fix and pay attention to. And it's easier to point blame and judge somebody else. So it's very interesting the way judgment works in our lives. And I've just been hearing so much judgment from my clients this week. Everybody is judging themselves so harshly.
Yeah. Oh, well, you just said judging yourself. So maybe that's a whole different territory that we go into, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we judge in three ways. We judge ourselves, we judge people, and we judge situations and circumstances, right? There's really three things that we are always judging and based around. And remember, judgment is really part of the ego. And it comes from the ego because it creates this, I guess, tug and pull, or this balance up and down the seesaw, however you want to look at it. It comes from the ego. It comes from a place of sometimes criticism. And that's where most people struggle is, well, if I had just done that differently, they look at themselves like they're always the problem in the situation, right? And that's not always the case.
A lot of times judgment also comes in the form of appearance. I think that maybe that might even be the number one thing that's judged. Like, oh, look what she's wearing. Like, how could she even wear that? Or, I hear this, my daughter's 14. One of her favorite words lately is judgment. Like, why are they judging me? Why am I being, I don't want to be judged.
Talk about teenagers. I have a 13-year-old, so our kids are not that far apart, but like, my goodness, the amount of judgment and scrutiny that teenagers are up against these days. I would not want to be a teenager with Instagram and TikTok and all of these social media platforms, because I just think we're constantly put in a place to judge somebody else and to judge ourselves, right? I mean, and social media is that fakeness of life. We don't always see the truth. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that put very truthful things out, and I'm not saying that's not the case, but and I have to say, I've seen more people put out more authenticity recently than when Facebook and Instagram really started out, right? I see a lot more authenticity happening, especially on TikTok. There's a lot more authentic, but the key point is that we teenagers, kids, are totally exposed to every single minute to judgment.
Yep.
And it's bad enough as a teenager how much judgment and self-confidence activity goes on as a teenager in developing yourself, where you're judging yourself. And I think that's one of the places where it really sneaks in is when you're a teenager.
100%. And judgment is also comparison. So you're looking at somebody else. They don't look like that.
Right.
Yep. And I hear it all the time. Like, my friend just told me that I'm fat. I'm like, you're not fat. Like, I'm not even close.
Right.
And it's like silly things like that. But again, it's, and here we go. with not sound old, but a generation that's being brought up on judgment.
Right.
in
Correct.
social media.
Correct. And I think it's a very timely conversation to have around judgment and comparison, because when we compare ourselves to others, when we pass judgment on other people, if it makes us judge ourselves that much more harshly, that, oh, I haven't achieved this yet, or I haven't done that yet, why are they being successful? It just snowballs and hurts our self-confidence and how much we actually trust ourselves, right? So one of the things that I've been really working with clients to do is to be more discerning, to discern things a little bit more than to judge things. And really, when you think about discernment is looking at things as they are. What's the facts? What are the facts? What are the patterns? What are the situations that exist, that you don't need to insert this judgmental tone, or you don't need to insert that emotion? Because the second that you insert a level of emotion, it now becomes no longer discernment, but it becomes judgment. So, for example, people say you give somebody something to do, right? Say you give them a task to do, and 3 times before they are late with that task. Discernment says the 4th time they're most likely going to be late. Judgment comes in when you start to feel frustrated or angry that that person didn't do what they were supposed to do. So they're no longer a good person, or you're judging them as not being up to par. And you're saying, now the fact is they may not be living up to the standard that you've set, but without the emotion, you can say they're not living up to the standard. But with judgment, with the emotion, you're making a determination and criticizing and passing a judgment on that person, saying that they didn't live up to the standard, therefore it makes them a poor employee. When that may not be the case at all. They're just not living up to the standard, right? We have to be more discerning and look for the facts of the situation.
So let's look at that situation and how it could be dealt with. I guess number one would be, if you just went on the discernment and had a conversation with them, you might say something like, when we assign a task, we expect it to be done. And here we go with the facts. It's been 3 times already. You've been late doing it, or it wasn't done properly. Now we're on to the 4th time. This is really what we expect. That's our expectations here.
Yep.
And the other side, number 2, would be, what is your problem? Why can't you, 4 times already, and you got it. What's your issue? Because it's really annoying me that you can't get this done. And we're probably going to have to find somebody else. And it's very frustrating. And I guess I'm judging in number 2.
Right. And number 2, you're passing full judgment. And number 2, but you see, here's the thing, that the outcome in discernment versus judgment is a solution. When there's judgment, the solution may not be a positive solution, it may be a negative solution, and it may be driven by the emotion, right? So you know how they say never go to bed angry, or never make a decision out of anger, never make a decision out of fear, never do those things, because there's some kind of judgment, there's a blindsidedness that happens. But when you discern, you can find more solution. You can be more curious. You should be asking the questions. So 3 times before you've missed this deadline, what keeps getting in your way? And that's what I do as a coach. When you don't achieve something, I don't blame you and say, oh, why didn't you do this? How come? That's really upsetting that you didn't do it. I'm really disappointed. That would be complete judgment. And in coaching, it's a judgment-free zone, right? So the question I ask is, so tell me what got in the way of that getting done, or what got in your way, what came up for you that you were not able to do what we had set out to do. Because there's no judgment there. We're looking specifically for facts, and we're looking to drive a solution.
Yep.
When we're judging, that solution is not as obvious.
It's almost like when you start judging, you're muddying up the waters, and it's just, there's all different things going on. And I guess the other part of it would be 3 times not doing the task as expected. And we're assuming that we know what the expectations are, but we could even say, tell me how I can help you with that. What is there something that we can do here to make this work? Because, the 4th time is going to be an even bigger challenge for us.
Yeah. I mean, I used to have these conversations all the time with employees that were showing up late to work. You look for patterns of behavior. Again, you're looking for the state as things are, and there's typically a pattern when you need to discern something. And if you're looking at, if an employee is showing up late 3-4 times a week, or they always show up late on a Wednesday, or they always show late up on a Thursday, you've got to address that in a discerning, non-judgmental way and say, so I've noticed a pattern that every Wednesday you are late for work. Can you tell me what the reason for that lateness is? Oh, well, on Wednesdays, I don't have daycare. I have to bring a half hour away from my house before I can turn around and bring them to get to my job. So it's hard for me to get here on time. Understood. Would it be easier if we changed your hours on Wednesday to be 10 o'clock as opposed to 9 o'clock? Because if you could work 10 to 6, would that be possible versus working 9 to 5, right? We find the solution, but we understand the foundation and we look for the facts of why that's happening.
Well, you said facts, and I was just about to jump in with that because it's so critical. And once you're dealing in only facts, you can't dispute it.
Mm-hmm.
Not about emotion. You can put all of that stuff aside. The facts speak for themselves. That's right. It.
And I think that's a key to having any difficult conversation too, Steve, is that a lot of times when people know they have to have a tough conversation, they are filled with judgment and emotion. There is a ton of emotion going into that difficult conversation, whether it's your fear of having that conversation. Maybe you're feeling, because of the fear, you're feeling sad, or you're feeling concerned, or you're worried that you're not going to have an effective conversation. And that judgment that's already there makes it very difficult to have what is already a difficult conversation. But when you stick to the facts, you win. Yep. The conversation is that much more effective. When I was a VP, I used to do a lot of terminations. And I never liked having those termination conversations. I always had HR present, thank goodness. But I never really enjoyed those conversations because those are very difficult conversations to have with people. But one of the things that I learned how to do very early on was stick to the facts, right? People don't get fired. People fire themselves. Unless there's a layoff, unless there's a reduction in force, where there is no reason behind why somebody's getting terminated, that it's just a restructure, that's one thing. But when somebody gets fired, right, a layoff is very different than a firing. When someone gets fired, it's because they fired themselves. I'm a firm believer that you fire yourself, right? And here's where the facts, where the discerning comes into play. You either did meet deadlines or you didn't meet deadlines. And after we reset expectations, you still failed to meet those expectations. That's a fact, right? You can't, it's black and white. You show up late for work several days a week. We tried to help. We tried to fix the situation. We tried to make it easier for you, but you still were late and that pattern existed and that impacted our operation. Well, that's a reason why you're being terminated, but I didn't do that. It's the fact of the situation that's what you did and not holding up your end of the bargain.
Yep. Yeah, you control your own destiny.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you don't discern and you don't look for the facts, those conversations are much more difficult to have.
So when it comes to, and by the way, we're talking with success strategy coach Tom Marino. You can find him at tommarino.com. When it comes to judgment, is there a big play sometimes with narcissism?
That's a good question. So here's the thing. Narcissists have very little self-awareness. Okay. And they create a reality that they believe is true. Okay. So they're judging you based on their reality. So it may not be based in fact, right? So if you think about, there are a lot of politicians that are narcissists, right? There's a lot of people that they believe a certain reality and all they care about is, oh, the people love me, right? Because that's what a narcissist wants. They want all the love from people. And we talked about gaslighting in the past. Mm-hmm. Narcissists are very good at gaslighting because they create this reality that is only true to them and they may not be true to you, right? So the level of judgment is based on their reality, not necessarily facts. So they have a difficult time discerning the facts. they would have a more difficult time with the discernment process than, say, somebody who's not a narcissist.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic there. You know,
Yeah.
if you introduce narcissism, because it almost changes the judgment zone a little bit.
Yeah. Well, because, remember, narcissists want to be loved, and that's all they care about. So they have to create realities that exist, right? And it's very difficult to manage and have difficult conversations with the narcissist because their world and your world are never the same. They're never the two things. It's only how the narcissist sees it. So you have to come into their world and discern the facts of their world as they see the facts of their world. And then and it's not really fact. But you see judgment come up so much too when people are being manipulative, right? So narcissists, borderline personalities, all of these cluster B personalities, they tend to be manipulative in many ways, right? And manipulation can also be very difficult to get a discerning perspective from, because there's always that I'm trying to get what I want out of the situation. And you see this, I was talking to somebody that's going through a divorce, and he just feels entirely manipulated by his ex, and he's trying to navigate through, and the divorce process is complicated by a manipulative personality or a narcissistic personality, because it's very hard to remain true to the facts of the situation.
What's your advice for that in that situation?
Well, the key is that, in any gaslighting situation, is take evidence, look for the evidence, try to find the evidence, look for the text messages, look for the behaviors, look for the actions that person takes on a regular basis, document it, keep a record of those kinds of things, have a witness to certain events if you can have a witness, right? That's how you overcome the gaslighting element of it, that manipulation of it. But you have to have your data so that you can present the facts as though they exist.
Yeah, I will say, like in my life journey, I just go with the facts, and it's been, you can't lose with the facts. That they are what they are.
And it's an opportunity too, when you go with the facts, to really hold yourself accountable.
And then there's that, right?
It's the willingness that once you've discerned it, the thing that changes is if you hold yourself accountable or not, and not judge yourself because of that. Okay, I made the mistake. It was my error. Here is my solution to how I'm going to fix my error, is very different than I made a mistake. Well, too bad. And you move on. Like, it's always how you respond to those situations, but you've got to hold yourself accountable when the facts say the accountability is on you, man. You've got to hold yourself accountable. Take divorce, take cheating. You cheat with somebody, it's a fact that you cheated. There is nothing you could do to change that happened. What you change is how you hold yourself accountable as you move forward. And that's what makes the difference. I was talking to a client a little while ago, and he has an employee who made a mistake on an application for something, and that person was not owning it at all. So it was causing this extreme frustration in him. And now he was judging where he didn't need to bring in judgment. The facts were simple. You made a mistake on this. You need to correct it. Take the accountability and correct it. But the inability of the employee to take the accountability to correct it frustrated the heck out of him. And now he's taking on all of this emotional baggage and creating a world of judgment that becomes so negative that he's going to lose sight of some of the solutions that are there. Judgment clouds our vision, period. It makes us very monocular, okay? It puts us in that tunnel. It blindsides us. Whereas discerning the facts and looking for possibilities is all part of the process.
Well, the one thing I'm learning today in a big way is the emotional connection to it.
Right.
And that could be, you could be judging somebody for whatever situation it might be. Maybe deep down inside, you don't really like that person. but that's an emotional connection to them, and that fuels the judgment. And then in your example of the person dealing with the situation at work, I'm sure he's frustrated because now what do I do?
Right.
The employee's not owning up to it. What do I do? What am I going to do? I think you just need to make it black and white. This is what we expected. Please correct it. If you do not, this is what's going to happen. And that's it.
Correct. And that was exactly the solution that we came up with by the end of his session is that he needed to restate the expectation, right? Yeah. Because when you restate the expectations come into what's true and what's not true, right? I expect you to do this. I expect you to handle this situation. I know you're going to make mistakes. I said, you got to acknowledge that we're going to make mistakes.
Sure.
Acknowledge that, yes, I expect you to make mistakes. But what I expect is when you make a mistake to hold yourself accountable and not to be juvenile and handle yourself as a child, blaming everybody else except yourself, right? That's what came out of it. And I was like, this is great. I said, you've hit the nail on the head. It's how we respond to it, right? When you discern, you can respond more positively. You can respond in a better way than in an emotional, reactive, judgmental way when you're judging.
It can be challenging because the emotions are very strong sometimes. And it's, I think it's also conditioning. You have to just, kind of wean that off sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. It's how it has a lot to do with how we're conditioned and raised to do things in situations. Sometimes, the examples that we set, if you ever, I use the parking lot example, right? You ever backed into somebody's car and just drove off because there was no damage done, and your children are sitting in that car with you? You're teaching them to not take accountability. You're teaching them not to, and just to move on. And if they learn that, they're going to be conditioned in that way. And they're never going to take accountability. And they're going to learn some really hard lessons in life, right? It's that entitlement that comes up, right? That sense of entitlement is because we didn't hold ourselves accountable for our actions. And we have to be very careful how that plays.
Well, right back to being a parent, especially a parent of a teen, it's, they're watching.
they're watching everything, and they are so judgmental of us.
Yes.
Let's talk about that for a quick second.
Oh yeah.
It comes back to us because they feel so. As what I notice with my kids, especially my daughter who's preteen, she's 11, and my son's 13. When they are feeling judged, and when they are seeing things that hurt them, they take it out on us as parents, and they'll start judging us, or they'll start saying, well, you didn't do that there. Like, well, no, I didn't do that there. And you're right. And I was wrong not to do that. But as the parent, you have to be willing to say to your kids, I was wrong and I'm human too, but here's how I'm going to fix it and how I'm going to make it better. But I think what we have to recognize is that the stress that our children are going through because of the judgment, because they don't know how to deal with that judgment. They have a lot of new emotions that they're feeling for the first time. And we have to be ready and willing to help them navigate that and teach them how to separate the emotion and look at the facts, right? And look at the situation for what it is. And I think the more that you can do that for them, the better they will be as adults in responding to judgment and criticism.
And doing it in such a way that you're being loving and just their friend and a parent at the same time. I was in a situation with my daughter a couple of weeks ago, and she was having an issue with a friend, and she was, ready to snarly text back. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. All right, what are you actually writing to her? And we talked about what to write. It was a friend was borrowed something, never gave it back, but the right way to do it, and letting them feel like it's their decision in terms of what's to type or text. But it's a very delicate balance.
It's a very delicate balance. And yeah, text messaging.
Oh, here we go. Yes.
And listen, and kids are boys I know are the worst communicators, especially at this age, 13 and older. They don't know how to communicate well on text. They don't know how to figure things out well. It's a new language for them in many ways, right? Learning how to communicate with your friends as adults do through text and messaging and all of that is confusing for them. just as it's confusing for us, it's also confusing for them.
Okay.
And I think we have to remember that just because they grew up with the technology doesn't mean that they're proficient at it.
100%. And it's funny, like you have a boy and a girl, I have a boy and a girl. And when you look at, a guy who's a teen or preteen, whatever, it's a lack of emotion. Then when you look at the girl, it's fueled with emotion. So
absolutely.
It's like both sides.
Exactly. You get the extremes. And listen, this is the whole paradigm of men and women, females and males. I mean, it's always been that way. And but there's a lot to learn from both groups. And the key is that when things get too emotional, the key is to step back and remove the emotion for a second. Because the second you start to do that, you find the clarity in what you're trying to understand.
It's funny. I was talking to somebody at the gym yesterday, and I just barely know her. We just talk, and we kind of see eye to eye on a lot of things. And she's getting out of a bad relationship, and she just went on a couple of dates with this guy. And she says, "But he's horrible at texting. He's the worst." And well, do you like him? Well, I have fun with him. Yeah, he's I kind of like him. Yeah, but I can't deal with the text. I'm like, well, it's some people view texting different ways. Quick communication. I'm done. That's it. Or maybe he doesn't communicate. But if he communicates in person well, then that's what's really important, right?
You have to, and that's a very good point. You have to know what people's best communication styles are. You can't assume because you're good at one that the other person's going to be good at the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tom, it's always great talking with you. It's like we jump into something and then it's like things come up and pop up and very relatable too, especially with teens and just
absolutely
the emotional part of it. If somebody wants to reach out to you in any aspect, professionally, let's say somebody has a company, corporation, or even on a personal level, what do they do?
Yeah. So the big theme that's been coming up this week is small business owners that have been divorced. So are going through a divorce. So I've had several new people come to me for that reason. So it must be something in the universe. So if you are going through a divorce, you're a small business owner, definitely reach out to me at this time. You can reach me by texting me at 516-588-0750. That's 516-588-0750, or just visit me at tommarino.com.
And those are the facts.
Those are the facts, my friend.
Without a doubt. Thanks, Tom. And I know we're not going to talk for the next couple of weeks. Have a great vacay. And
thank you. Just looking forward to it, Steve. It was great to see you.
Same here, Tom. We'll be right back.
Are you experiencing a stormy season in your life? Well, it's time to change that. It's time for you to choose your adrenalized life. And I can show you how. I'm Tom Marino, Success Strategy Coach. And I've worked for years with my clients to create harmony and live adrenalized through the power of their choices. Visit tommarino.com, that's tommarino.com, and learn more today about how you can choose your adrenalized life. I work with small business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, and young professionals to navigate these stormy seasons. I help you to clarify your mindset, overcome obstacles, integrate fear, and establish very strong boundaries. I will help you set the goals to set all of that in motion. So visit tommarino.com, that's tommarino.com, and choose your adrenalized life.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.